Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ben, welcome to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about what I think might be the best and easiest dual battery setup you can run. Now, this isn't going to be a 30-minute in-depth lecture on battery chemistry and voltages and electrical engineering because, to be honest, that would take way more than half an hour, and there's a million different ways to set up a dual battery system. What it's really going to come down to is evaluating your own personal circumstances and needs to figure out what's going to be best suited for your own rig. So with that said though, if you do have any questions or want some more in-depth answers to anything I'm talking about, definitely drop a comment below and I will get back to every single one of them. So to jump right into my setup, we've got to be clear about the things I was taking into consideration before I started buying any parts online. The first is really my use case, and I think that I've got a pretty basic use case that probably closely mirrors what a lot of you are trying to achieve. I knew that I wanted some extra charging capabilities for my electronics, cell phones, iPads, camera batteries, things like that. And I also knew that I wanted to run some auxiliary lighting even when the truck is off. Things like showing up to camp late at night and having some scene lights or work lights to get things set up and cook dinner, things like that. So with that in mind, the second big thing to take into consideration is the duration that you want to do this type of stuff for. So most of my trips right now end up being around 3 to 5 days long, and I do a fair bit of driving on those trips. If it's a 5-day trip, I've probably got 2 or 3 spots that I want to get to and explore. So I'm pretty confident that using the alternator to keep the spare battery charged will be a system that works pretty well for me. However, in the future, I do want to start doing more extended trips. Maybe I'm going backpacking and it's going to be like a 3-day backpacking trip and I want, you know, the fridge and everything to still be running when I get back. Or maybe it's a 2 to 3 week trip where we're sort of setting up base camp places and exploring from that base camp and you're spending a lot more time parked. So with that in mind, I also wanted a fairly simple way to hook up a solar panel system to keep the spare battery charged as well. So with those two main considerations in mind, the first thing I did was actually rule out using a system like this. This is the Goal Zero Yeti 400 and I love it. I've had this one for a while. They make the Yetis all the way up to like 4,000 massive battery packs. And if your use case looks more just like charging electronics on like a 2 to 3 day trip, then maybe the Yeti 400 would be the right fit for you. And actually, when I first got the Dometic, I was running the Dometic off the truck's AC inverter while we were driving, and when we would stop, I would plug it into the Yeti, and that would sort of work for a short overnight trip or even like a 2-day trip. However, knowing that I wanted to do some longer duration travel and longer duration trips, I decided to rule out the Goal Zero system and look for a fully built-in dual battery setup. So I had said that in my mind, I think this might be the best and easiest dual battery setup you can run. And I think that for a number of different reasons. Really, I think the parts list that's required is pretty short, and that makes it fairly appealing to me. The second thing is that the bulk of those parts that you do need are all available on Amazon, which is something that I love. And I think the third thing is you don't have to be an electrician or an electrical engineer to get this setup wired up and working properly. It's fairly simple to install and get up and running. So we've really got only 3 main components in this dual battery setup. The first is obviously your battery, and you're going to want a way to mount that. For the 4Runner, luckily there's a ton of easy ways to do that. I use the C4 Fabrications dual battery bracket that installs in the dead space right on the passenger side of the engine compartment and took honestly only like 30 minutes to install. It was super quick and painless. So the second key piece of this setup is really the brains of the operation. It's the battery charger, battery controller, DC-DC charger, whatever you want to call it. It's the thing that interfaces with your car's alternator or your solar system and keeps that auxiliary battery charged. Because of the considerations that I took into account, namely the fact that I did want the alternator to charge the battery up, and I did want to also have the option to use solar panels, that's what led me to the system that I settled on, which is the C-Tech DC-DC charger. This is sort of a great system for me because it's dead simple. There's 4 wires basically that you need to hook up to it, and it actually lets us charge a deep cycle battery from the vehicle's alternator while we're driving without hurting the battery. And there's some technical mumbo jumbo involved there where the alternator's output voltage isn't actually enough to do a full charge cycle of a deep cycle battery and things like that. And basically, you don't have to worry about any of that by just dropping the CTEK DC-DC charger in there. The other thing that I really like about this is that there's also an input for solar panels. So with one box that lives under my hood, I can wire up my solar panels, I wire up the alternator, and I can keep my auxiliary battery totally charged and keep my starter battery also totally protected. So I think it's a great system. There's a ton of other options out there. You can do your research. The things like the stuff that Red Arc is doing is great. The setups that people are running from Blue Sea Systems are also awesome. But for me, the ease of implementation and the fact that the CTEK has just worked for me is why I really love it. So the third and final piece of a dual battery setup is really the power distribution. You've got your battery, you're keeping it charged, and you know the things that you want to power off this auxiliary battery. So I went with the Blue Sea Systems 12-volt fuse block power distribution panel, and that is awesome because it gives me a lot of options to hook up different adapters and accessories, fuse them at the appropriate levels, and keep everything neat and tidy. So all I had to do here was run a single 12-volt line off the secondary battery, through the firewall, down the passenger side kick panel, and into the trunk storage compartment. And there's actually a really convenient and unobtrusive place for this power distribution panel to live in the rear passenger wheel well. I chose to run it to the back and do the power distribution back there just because of the things that I'm trying to do with it. I know my fridge lives back there, so I can shorten the wire run to the fridge by having the distribution block down there. I know that it's a pretty easy way for me to get up and into the rooftop tent to mount a USB charger for cell phones and things like that. And it's also a fairly convenient place for any sort of auxiliary lights to run the power leads to pick them up from there. So let's jump right into the setup. The first thing you're going to need is a way to mount your auxiliary battery. For my 4Runner, I'm using the C4 Fabrications dual battery bracket, which is super easy to install. And this bracket can accommodate up to a Group 34 deep cycle battery. So I'd suggest finding one of those. It could be an X2, an Optima, an Odyssey, whatever you prefer, just at the best price you can get. The real heart of this system then is the DC-DC battery charger from CTEK, which hooks up to your alternator to keep your battery charged while you're driving, and can accept a solar input, or the manual even mentions a wind turbine to keep your battery charged while you're parked. And then the output of your auxiliary battery will just run to the fuse block where you can hook up all of your accessories. Alright, so that'll do it for this video. Again, if you've got any questions about the dual battery setup that I'm running, or about dual battery setups in general, definitely drop them down in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond to you. And if you liked this video, go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and until next time, get out and explore somewhere.